Alright, so everyone, welcome back to another video of Salesforce Makes Sense, and this is part 3 of sharing settings, right? So, in the first part, we discussed sharing settings in general. We talked about a brief introduction of what security and sharing means, what is the underlying metadata permissions and profile permissions we need to provide. We then started off with OWD, the org-wide defaults, right? The base level foundation of sharing. And then we moved on to role hierarchy. In part 2, we talked about sharing rules, creating a record based, owner based, criteria based sharing rules, right? So you can create something based on the owner or something based on the criteria. So we've covered all of that as of now, and in this particular section, we'll try to conclude the sharing settings or rather the sharing topic altogether. And we'll now talk about manual sharing, right? So this comes in after you have done everything, right? So when I say everything, I mean this particular pyramid right here. So you've given the underlying object permissions, right? You've given the underlying object level permissions, create, read, edit, delete, and then you have also given the field level permissions. Which field should be accessible to what user or profile via profile permissions or permission set. And then to access the records, you have defined org wide defaults. So let's say for an object called case, you have defined the setting as private, and then you have enabled role hierarchy, and you have said that okay, for cases grant access using hierarchies, meaning if I have created a record, I am the record owner, my manager should be able to see my record. So that will be enabled via the role hierarchy. And then because we wanted to enable access or open up access for more users, so we created some public groups and public groups and queues, and we created sharing rules. We created custom rules wherein we said that okay, if this is the record which is owned by this particular user XYZ, share this record with these 10 people who are part of this public group or who are part of this particular role. So that's where we have created the sharing rule. Now a time comes when you have done all of it, but you might have a requirement as to give some ad hoc sharing to a specific user for a specific record, right? The sharing rules and the sharing settings that we have written and configured till now apply to all the records for the object, correct? Now, what if you want to do something on a specific record? Just for one record, you want to do something like if Himanshu owns this record, he wants to share it with some other person. He wants to manually share it. He does not want to rely on a rule or a criteria. So how can he do it? There are two interfaces for manual sharing like the platform provides. There is the classic experience and there's the lightning experience. Okay. And what you will notice is on every record, you get a share button or a sharing button. Do you want to check it out? Let's go to Salesforce. So let's open a account record, for example. So if I go and open the accounts tab and take a look at the records, I want to work on this specific record, right? I'm working on this record and I'm looking at this record. I want to talk to this account. I want to check what is their annual revenue. I want to see how many invoices they have created. I want to, assign them a customer ID. But let's say I'm not able to do all of this. There is some other person from some another team who can take up this work, right? In that case, this new user should be able to access this record. Now assume that the OWD setting is private. Okay. Now how will this other user get access to the record? And only this trailhead record that we are talking. So if I create a sharing rule, I will be able to share all the records owned by Himanshu to the user. But I don't want to do that. I want to do it on a record to record basis. So I just want to share this particular record. So this right now here is the lightning experience, right? And on the highlights panel, you see a lot of options. These are called quick actions, right? And one of the buttons available here is called sharing, and this enables you to manually share this particular record with a set of users, individual user or maybe a role. Okay, so you can find or search your users here, right? You can find and search your users. What you can also do is instead of users, you can choose partner users, portal users, public groups, roles, and all of these options. So if you want to go with a public group, you can say I want to share it with the APAC sales team group, right? So this would happen on a record to record basis, meaning the trailhead account record will be shared with this specific user, correct? So if I do this, it tells me what kind of access do you want to give. For account, I have two options because the OWD is private. I can only open up access, correct? So read only or read write. So I want him to be able to read and write. What about case? I'll say he should be able to see the cases and he should be able to modify the opportunity. I'll say save. So this shares the trailed account record, just one record, manually to Shinje because of the sharing that I did using the button. And this button is the button available on Lightning experience. Okay, if I go to, let's say, quotes, let's see if I have any quote records available. So we don't have any quotes. Let's take a look at maybe something. Let's take a look at cases. Let's take a look at case. So there are no buttons available here, right? So that means we might be able to add in the button if you change the compact layout. All right. How do you do that? If I go to edit object, I can go to the page layout and I can add the quick actions. All right. But there are certain objects which do not have the sharing option at all. Okay. So if I go to case page layouts, let's quickly see. Let's take this case layout. So when we modify the case layout, you should see a sharing button enabled. And this is something that's available in both Lightning and Classic. All right. So I'll go to mobile and Lightning actions because right now we are on the Lightning version. Here you will notice there's a button that's called sharing. So I'll just get this button and I need to drop it here. So I'll just say override the predefined actions and the sharing button is now available here. I'll just say save. And now let's refresh our case page. Let's see. So I still don't see it. Maybe the wrong page layout is assigned. So if I just go back, if I let's say go back to edit setup, oh, we are here, and I'll just say go to page layouts, assignment. Let's see for the system admin what layout is assigned. Okay, so this how we roll layout is assigned. Let's remove it and let's change it with the case layout. Okay, so I'll just say choose the case layout and I want to go to the system administrator and I'll say set it as the case layout. Correct, and I'll say save. Now that I save it, I'll refresh my case record page and I should see some more buttons coming up on the highlights panel. I still don't see the buttons. Why is that? The case layout is assigned to the system admin, which is good. Let's refresh one more time. Let's go to, let's try to log out and log in. Sometimes cache is the issue. I'll just try to log out and log in once. So I still don't see the buttons. This could be now on the record page. So I'll just go ahead and say edit page. Let's see. It might have been hidden on the page layout, record page level. So let's go ahead and check. So this is the enhanced case layout. Let's click on the highlights panel and you'll notice that only one action has been enabled. Correct? So instead of this, if I go ahead and try to add an action, I should be able to say sharing. And since it is added on the page layout, it should be visible here. Okay, so I just said save. Let's go back now, and now I should see the sharing button. So you see, to get a button, you need to check so many things. First, you need to check the page layout. It is assigned on the page layout. Then you check the assignment, if the profile is assigned the right page or not. And then you check if even if it's still not showing, you come and modify the record page because it was hidden here. I just added the button, and now the sharing option is available. Same thing. Correct? Now, what when you are doing this on the account level, you saw three options: account, case, and opportunity. And you are doing it on the case level, you are getting only case. Why? Because of the relationship fields. Opportunity is a child of account, right? And it's completely dependent on how the account sharing will work. That's why you get any case or opportunity that is a child of account, you can set the sharing, manual sharing for those objects also if you are doing it for account. But if you're doing for an individual independent object, you'll be able to only set it for that particular object. And why are you seeing read only and read write? Because you only open up access, and it is private currently on the OWD. You can just open up by saying read only or maybe read write. All right. How do you see who all are already given access to this record? You see this particular line that says shared with one group of users. If you click on edit, it says that the UK sales team queue currently has the entire access on case. And this is because our sharing rule. Okay. And if you want to see the hierarchy, you have the sharing hierarchy available also. So you'll see that Himanshu, who's the record owner, has full access. The integration security and the Shinjay user have read-only access to the case. So you can see everything about the case, the sharing history, the sharing details, what kind of access a specific user has, who all are able to see it or view it, everything is visible. And if you want to add more people, add more roles, add more users or groups, you can do it by clicking the sharing button. All right, that was the lightning experience, and it is only available for a limited set of objects using the sharing button. So in case, see, in our case, we looked at the case, right? The sharing button was not available, but it was not available because it was not part of the layout. But there are some objects wherein sharing is not enabled by Salesforce itself. So take a look at the documentation in case you are looking for sharing for a specific object. Okay, but it is available for most of the objects. If in case you don't get it on lightning, try to switch to the classic experience and you should see the share button. How do you do that? This is this classic experience right here. Okay, so let's go to accounts, trailhead, and if I click on the bear icon here, and I can say switch to Salesforce classic. All right, so this is the previous UI that Salesforce had, right? This is something that I mean, I have started working with, which is why I feel I work faster in the classic experience and now the lightning experience. So if I open this particular account, you'll see there's a sharing button available on the classic experience, and it is pretty much the same thing. You see the people who have access, you see what kind of access do they hold, and then you can also add more people, and the same list is shown up here, the same kind of options. It's just that the UI is different. That's it. Okay. So this is how you can do manual sharing. Now, if someone asks, manual sharing can be done for multiple records at once? Ideally, no. You would want to write a sharing rule, right? Manual sharing is specifically for scenarios wherein you want to do it for a specific record. Correct? If you had to do it for multiple records, why do manually one by one? You can simply create a sharing rule. Correct? So in cases wherein you are not doing it for multiple users, it is on a scenario to scenario basis, for a use case to use case basis, requirement to requirement basis, you can use manual sharing. And you can use this information to understand which users in your system have access to what records. All right, so that was, I think, all about manual sharing. The next bit coming up is the Apex managed sharing. Everything that we did till now is configurable actions. Everything is from the platform. We are just configuring, point and click, selecting, unselecting, and then seeing things work like magic. But if you have a use case wherein the use case is a bit technical. When I say technical, I mean you have a lot of criteria that cannot be achieved by the standard sharing rule or maybe the standard OWD, right? In that case, how do you enable sharing? For example, if a specific account, whenever it is created, is of the type prospect, has an annual revenue more than 60,000, is currently owned by the customer portal user ABC, and maybe two or three other criteria. In such case, you need to share this particular account record, or any of these kind of records, to a certain set of people. Those people are not fixed. You should be able to share them to people who are part of this particular profile or this particular permission set. How do you handle this kind of scenario to share records? That's where Apex Managed Sharing comes into the picture, wherein you share the records by writing some custom code by writing Apex. Okay, I know Apex is something that has not come on my channel yet as a series, but that's the very next thing that's coming up. You can take this as the inaugurational welcome message for the Apex Masterclass. Right after these set of videos, the Apex curriculum is coming live, and it will be a pretty good uh, series of pretty much everything that you need to learn and write server-side Apex language from start, right? From the very beginning, from the very basics. So that's something that's coming up next. That's something I'm working on right now. All right. But for this particular example, this particular use case, we'll try to understand how does it work. Okay. So Apex managed sharing. Sharing enables the record level access control for all custom objects as well as many standard objects. All right. Now the admin can first set the OWD. They can then grant additional access by record ownership, role hierarchy, sharing rules, and manage manual sharing. On top of it, if there's a requirement, developers can then write Apex to grant additional access programmatically by with using Apex. So if there's a requirement to programmatically handle sharing requirements, right? Provide or enable access to a certain set of users based on a criteria that can only be handled programmatically. That's when developers come into the picture and they write Apex managed sharing custom code. How do they do it? Let's take a look at the snippet. Okay, so to access sharing programmatically, you must use the share object. Now, what happens is every object that you have, name a random object. What did you say? Account, contact, lead, some custom object ABC, case. Every object has an inherent share object. If you say account, there's always a share object, account share. If you say contact, there's always a contact share object. If it is a custom object, which is called custom object underscore underscore C, there is a share object for it. That's called custom object underscore underscore share. And this is something Salesforce creates automatically and keeps. And you can leverage this. You can use this to enable access or share records. Do you want to see this in live action? Let's take a look at the developer console. What do we do normally? We normally query the account records, right? So if I say select ID comma name from account, how many records do we see? 15 records. Let's talk about trailhead record that we are working on. Let's talk about Himanshu M, right? So this is the record. Now there's an object that's called account share. So if I say account share and if I say select ID comma user or group ID comma parent ID, this will be account ID where account ID equals this particular Himanshu's record. I'm just pasting this ID and let's put the access level field as well. Let's say execute. Let's remove this. I think it should be called access type. So you see there is one person which can be a user or a group who has access to this particular account. Let's take a look at what is the name of the account. It should be Himanshu M, correct? So let's say account.name. So Himanshu M, who has access to it? Let's see, user or group dot name. Let's put the name here. So you see, the user who's the owner has access to the record, but this is not a relevant example. Let's try something else. So let's say account.name equals trailhead. Let's look at that because that is shared with multiple people, right? Let me get rid of the name here so that I can show you the IDs first. So you see the trailhead account, there's only one account, but there are four account share records. See, four account share records. What do you see with you see something different here. You see the user or group ID. This is the people who have access to the record account. The first three are users. The fourth one is a group. You see 005, 005, 005. User records start with 005, correct? And 00G is for public groups or queues, right? So if I go ahead and try to show you what are the names of these users or groups, if I say execute, it says integration user, Himanshu, Shinjay, and UK sales team. These are the four set of people who have access to the account record trailhead. And how are you able to fetch this information? By querying the account share record. Okay, there's another important field that's called row cause. Row cause. Execute. This tells you what kind of sharing is applied. So take a look here. Himanshu Maheshwari has access to Trailhead account. Why? Because he's the record owner. Okay. Integration user and Shinjay have been given access by manual sharing or row cause equal to manual. That's the default level. And The implicit parent is UK sales team because role hierarchy is enabled. UK sales team is getting access because it is the implicit parent of the owner. All right, so this is the role hierarchy coming into the picture. This is manual row cause, and this one right here is the ownership. So you see how Salesforce structures the entire sharing concept on record to record level. You can open any record into your system. You can just write the query to query the share object record. If you want to do contact share, so you have to query the contact share object. If you want to do lead share, so you'll have to do lead share. Basically the name of the object followed by the share keyword. Now, if it is a custom object, the only change that comes is if the object name is, let's say, abc underscore underscore c, you just need to remove the C and you can just query the share record like this. So if I say select ID from opportunity share, this is a standard object share. So I'm getting the query, I'm not getting errors. If I say custom obj share, which is another object that I have. Yeah, I think I'm getting the records now, right? So the custom obj is one object that I have. Let's open this object, custom obj. So you see the share object record is available here. The share object is available, correct? So if I want to take a look at the ID, parent ID, access level, row cause, user or group ID, I can simply say query and I can execute. Okay, and this will give me the entire data of of all the records being shared. If you want to look at a specific record, you take a look at the parent ID, you put that on the where clause. All right, great. Now looking at the actual syntax of how to write the Apex code so that you can actually create a sharing record manually. So what you have to do is you have to instantiate your share object record. Correct. So for example, this is the object name my obj. You can simply say my obj underscore underscore share equal to new my obj underscore underscore share. And then you have to just fill in these four fields. First of all, you need to associate what record is the parent for which you are enabling the sharing. So that's the parent ID field. Second one is the ID of the user or group or the set of users who need access to the record. So user or group ID. Third one is what kind of access do you want to give it to them? Read, write, read, write, what exact access is required. Okay. And the fourth one is row cause. Row cause is a flag that you can use to track what kind of access has been given. Salesforce uses the keyword manual as the default value. If it is a role hierarchy thing, it will use the keyword implicit parent. If you want to say custom, let's say if you want to say Apex managed, so you can even give that value. It is available, right? So row cause can be set to any value to understand why the record has been shared. This can help you in debugging later. And once you have set all the all the field variables, you can simply say database.insert obj share. Okay, and you can just say false, or you can simply say insert obj share. Two ways of inserting into Salesforce. All right, do you want to try it out right now? Let's go to anonymous window. Let's get rid of this code. And let's say I want to share the account record trailhead, or let's say I want to share the Himanshu's record, right? So if I get rid of everything here and if I open this particular record, Himanshu's record, right? So I think access level from account share is not available. So let's get rid of it. Let's say execute. So currently, only one user has the access to the record because the OWD is set to private. There is no sharing rule that on this particular record, and we have not given any manual sharing. Okay. Now, first of all, let's do something. Let's write this snippet. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll say account share. I'll instantiate it. Now share rec dot. First is the parent ID. Now since this is account share, it will be called account ID, the field. Okay, which is the account ID? Let me just pick it up from here. I'm just doing a static mapping right now just to show you an entry. Okay, what is the second thing? I want to give a row cause, right? So I'll say row cause explicit apex sharing. Let's give this keyword share rec dot user or group ID. Who do you want to share it with? Let's share it with Shinje's user. Okay, so I'll just go back to Shinjay's user and I'll try to share it. I'll just put the user ID here. So Shinjay's user is this one right here. So I'll just pick up this ID. I'll go back here, right? And let's keep focusing our eyes on this particular sharing information, right? So once everything is set, I'll simply say insert share rec. Okay, let's execute this code block. I'll say execute. So it says bad value for row cause. Let me just go ahead and say, I'll just try manual. It says account access field is missing. So there should be one more field, and it is not just the access level because it's the account share. It is called account access level. And I want to, let's say, provide read access. All right, so I've set the account ID, which is the parent ID. I've set the row cause as manual. I think this should be configurable, but we'll check that later. Okay, for now I've used this value that Salesforce accepts. User or group ID is a new user I want to share the record with, and then the account access level, okay, which I've given as read. So once I execute, all right, so we'll have to look at what combinations work, but what I've tried to do is create a, or rather insert a record. Okay, and when I click on refresh grid here now, you'll see that there are two sharing records created. The second one is the manual one that we have created. If you want to make sure, we can simply take this query again and see that this particular record, which was Himanshu M, is now also shared with Shinjay Tashi, because we shared it explicitly by writing Apex code. So you see, Himanshu M record was previously only shared with the owner. Now it is also shared with Shinjay Tashi, which has been done programmatically based on maybe some requirement. All right. So can I assign a public group here? Yes, I can do that. That's also possible. All right. If you want to create multiple share records, you have to run that in iteration, add this to a list and insert the list. That can also be done. Okay, we'll have to look at what are the potential and possible access levels for this particular requirement. Because it was the account share object, we have to do things like account access level, the child opportunity access level. But if you're doing something of a custom object, you don't need these things. You simply need share rec dot access level. That's it, just for that particular record. No other record is needed. Okay, row cause I think can be other values, but for now we have just put it as manual. And the account ID will become parent ID if you are doing any custom object share. Okay, that's the change in the share object. If you're not sure about what are the exact fields to use, you can always go to the developer console, and let's say for example I want to look at, let's see if I want to look at share.obj. So you see, these are all the share objects: case share, campaign share, business type, board type share. This is a custom object. So you see parent ID, user or group ID, access level, and row cause. All right. Then you have asset share, account share. All of the share objects are implicitly, inherently available. You don't create it, I don't create it. They get created by Salesforce, and we can use it to create or configure sharing records. And those sharing records help in defining and governing the access of the users. All right. So far, so good. Awesome. So that was all about Apex Managed Sharing, which was writing custom code to handle sharing programmatically. All right, the final nail on the coffin in sharing settings. If we go back here to our pyramid, right, we talked about the underlying permissions, we talked about the OWD, we talked about role hierarchy, sharing rules, and manual sharing. So far, everything that we have been doing is opening up access, right? But then this was not enough for the Salesforce platform, right? Just because we are opening up access, there were still requirements of how can I still kind of restrict or put a scope of the kind of records that the user should get access to. Let's assume that Himanshu has access to 174 records, but when he's accessing the system, I only want him to see 168 records. I want to filter out the 6 records. I don't want him to see it. I want him to restrict it. How do I restrict it? That's when Salesforce came up with restriction rules. All right. So there are two kinds of concepts that are relatively new in the sharing space. One is called restriction rules, and the second is called scoping. So these are not kind of sharing. They are not sharing, but they are more like restricting and filtering records. Okay, so if in an interview someone asks like what are the potential ways to share records, you can talk about the OWD, you can talk about the role, you can talk about sharing rules, you can talk about manual sharing, you can talk about custom Apex sharing, and then you can say that even after all this, if we want to restrict a specific kind of set of records, we can use restriction rules. If we want to filter out a set of records, we can use scoping rules. All right, let's quickly understand the difference between the two. So I've created a separate video wherein you see this in action, but for now let's talk about what these mean. Okay, so let's read this out. Restriction rule: when a restriction rule is applied to a user, the records that the user is granted access to via the OWD, sharing rules, and any other sharing mechanisms are filtered by the criteria that you specify. Okay, for example, if users today navigate to the today's tasks tab or to a list view for activities, they will only see the records that meet the restriction rules criteria. All right, and if a user, let's say, has a short link to the record, if it is not accessible after the restriction rule is applied, they will see a error message. They will not be able to access the record. Okay, what does that mean? This kind of means that the set the subset of OWD setting, on top of it the sharing setting, on top of it the sharing rules, on top of it manual sharing and any other sharing mechanism. After everything is calculated, on top of it restriction rules are applied. So if after everything, all the calculations, you as a user are entitled to see 78 records, and then restriction rules can neglect or remove the other 8, 10 records that you're supposed to see, so you'll end up seeing only 67 or 68 records. Make sense? Let's take a look at the Salesforce side of the world. So if I go to switch to Lightning Experience here, where are these available? Let's see. So where would you apply the rules? You would apply it on the object level. So if I go to setup and if I go to an let's open, let's say, let's go to object manager. Let's open the custom obj that we created and we have. So if I go to custom obj, you'll notice that you have restriction rules available here. Okay, now restriction rules currently are not available for all objects. So if you want to take a look at what objects it is currently available for, take a look at the considerations and limitations in the help article. Okay, so restriction rule considerations. So you can read more about it, which kind of objects are currently enabled for restriction rules, what kind of objects are allowed, what kind of filters you can put, how can you restrict, everything is available. Okay, so restriction rules are currently available for custom objects and external objects and these objects. So they are not available for standard objects. Okay, so similarly, scoping rules, you can take a look at the scoping rule considerations. They're the same thing. Okay, so you can just take a look at this information. Now if you go to custom object, you can go to restriction rules and you'll see, I hope there would be a diagram. Yes, so you see this diagram explains what I was trying to tell you. So by sharing, by granting access or by opening access, you use OWD and you use all the sharing mechanisms, and then on top of it you use filtering by adding a restriction rule. So whatever you have access to is filtered and then given to the user. All right, so if you have to create a new rule, you'll create it here, and here you'll just give it a name: filter out East Germany records. Okay, so I can say this will be an active restriction rule and I can put the user criteria. So you see, you can put a user criteria saying if the user belongs to a specific department, for example. So this is from the user object. If they belong from a specific country, right? If they belong from a specific locale, right? If they are from a specific, let's say, time zone, if they are active or not. So those kind of things you can put a check here, or you can also put the permission check. If the user has the specific permission, okay, and this would be like permission set. I currently don't have any permission set here, but you will be able to filter out the permission sets available. Okay, so if the user is assigned a particular permission set, right, in that case I want to select which records the user is able to see. So I can say, for example, I can say the user criteria, I can say if the user is from a specific locale and that locale is, let's say, Germany, which is for Germany filtering, I can simply say The criteria type would be the record field. I want to say that this user should only be able to see the records which are part of the Denmark region. Make sense? So when this user logs in, right? When any user logs in, the system will apply the sharing rule. The system will check the OWD for this object. The system will check all the sharing settings. Then it will find a set of records for this user to see. But before showing it to the user, they'll also filter out by using the restriction rules. So they'll see, okay, there's a restriction rule that is currently active. What does it say? Is the user's locale from Germany? I'll check. The currently logged in user is from Germany or not. I mean, the locale is from Germany or not. Oh, yes, it is from Germany. So Salesforce will only show them the records. The total records that came out after the sharing calculation, it will only show the records where the records of the region Denmark or SAP. Make sense? Did it make sense? So it is restricting the access of the entire set of data that is available because of the sharing settings. That is what it means. Okay, and the only difference between restriction rules and scoping rules is scoping rules will not restrict, but scoping rule will not let the user see, meaning you will still continue to have access to the 78 records that you have through the sharing rules, but because a scoping rule is applied, you'll be only be able to see 68 records. You'll not be able to see the 6 records. But if someone gives a link, will you be able to open it? Yes, you can open it because it is not restricted, it is just scoped. That's why they are called scoping rules. Okay, let's read it. Use scoping rules when you want to let users control the record set that they see. A scoping rule does not restrict the user's access to other records. Instead, they let your users focus on one set of records. Okay, so scoping rules are flexible. You can enable and disable them on a query by query basis. Plus, they don't restrict the access that your user have to records. So this will not remove or reduce the access, but these will do it. Restriction rules will reduce the access. It will filter. Scoping rules will not. Okay, where are scoping rules available? Let's quickly check. Scoping rules are also available. Sorry, they are also available on the object level. They are not available, looks like. So if I just quickly check, yeah, so it says that it is only available in performance and unlimited editions, right? Which is why I'm not able to see it. But if you're able to see it, you'll be able to configure what kind of scoping you can apply. And once that scoping rule is configured and created, you will be able to see a filter coming up here based on scope. Okay, so for example, if you have vehicles and if you have, like, let's say 80 records that you're seeing in vehicles, you want to scope it out to only a set of records. So based on the scoping rule defined, you can choose filter by not all, not my, you can filter by scope. Okay, so that is something that you can do. So instead of filter by owner, you can also filter by scope. That is something that's available. So I might not be able to show you because it's not available for my developer edition. It's available for performance and unlimited. Let me just check if I have, let me just use the keyword available. Let's check standard, custom. Let me take a look at the user object once. All right. So if I go to the user object, no, I don't have access, right? So I don't see access to most of the objects. I'll just check one or two before I conclude this, just so that I could show you how it looks like. So if I go to medication, nope, it's not here, right? So ideally you'll see this right below the restriction rules. You'll see it here. Okay, you might have to check this in a normal org that you are working on or working with on a project, right? Developer edition might not work. So in order to create scoping rules, you'll have to be on on an actual org to be able to take advantage of it. And once you create or configure a scoping rule, it will be available here on the filter by option. You'll be able to see it here on a list view level. You can just say filter by scope and it will filter your records based on the scope, meaning the access is not gone. It's just that you are able to see it in a you are able to see a subset of records that you want to currently focus in. That's the difference. That's it. All right, so you don't have to worry much about it. Okay, so that was all about restriction rules and scoping rules. Now, talking about an important thing, which is the common errors that are encountered due to sharing settings and rules. So we get n number of errors as developers. We have to debug a lot of issues, right? When there are multiple objects that are interlinked, a lot of sharing has been written region wise, locale wise, condition wise, ownership wise. There is the portal user, there is the internal user. A lot of issues come up when access is not correctly defined, right? So what are those errors that can hint towards, okay, this is a sharing issue, is what I've listed here. Okay, so remember we saw the oops insufficient privileges. That tells you that there's something wrong with the sharing. All right, if you see something like record access denied, or if you see something like role hierarchy issues, if you see sharing rule limit exceeded, all of this will basically be a hint that, okay, something is wrong with the sharing settings. Okay, what could go wrong? Let's talk about certain scenarios. If you don't have access to modify a record, you have access only to read the record, you'll be given this error, insufficient privileges, when you try to edit the record. Correct? Let's say you have a link to a record, but sharing settings have changed and you no longer have access to it. So when you try to open it, it will not let you open the record, which means the access will be denied. Okay, let's say for a specific custom object, you have not enabled the checkbox grant access using hierarchies, and your manager's manager is saying, why am I not able to see Himanshu's records? That's because the role hierarchy setting is not completely done properly. Okay, what if you ended up creating 50 criteria based sharing rules and then you are trying to create the 51st one? Because we only can create 50 sharing rules for criteria based, it will give you a limit exceeded error. Okay, then you might have something around field level security violations. Field level security violations mean you only have read access but you're trying to modify it. It will not let you do it. This is a scenario wherein you are trying to edit a field from Apex, let's say. Okay, let's say you've shared the entire object's records to the public group, to let's say 4 public group, but a user is not part of that public group and that user has raised a case saying I'm not able to see the records. That is a public group sharing error. You'll go to the public group for which the sharing rule is defined. You'll check if the user is part of that public group or not. If not, you will just simply add the user and the sharing will be recalculated. Manual sharing issues. So let's say someone is leaving the organization. So we want to remove access of that particular user to all the records that he or she had access to. So people might have given manual sharing to that user for certain work. So we have to identify that by querying the share record. So you can check what kind of records does this user have access to and you can delete those share records and then access will automatically be resolved. Okay, Apex sharing errors, similar to what we saw today. If you want to do account sharing, you have to enable and you have to configure the account access level and the opportunity access level. Okay, if you are trying to do some custom object, you have to define a row cause. You have to define which user or group to set. Let's say you have added an incorrect user. Let's say instead of putting the user ID, you put the profile ID. You will get a sharing error on the Apex side. Okay, criteria based sharing rule error. Let's say you define the criteria that people who are part of the Germany locale and for accounts where the revenue is more than 20,000 share the records to this particular public group. All right, and the public group that you assigned is wrong. It's a different one compared to what the business expected. So that criteria based sharing rule will share the records to the wrong set of people. Okay, org wide default misconfiguration. Let's say you enabled public read write on the on let's say some custom object for portal users. So now portal users are able to modify all the contacts. They're able to edit any and every field. They're able to change your birth date. They're able to change the email address and everything. That's wrong. They should not be able to do it as per business. So that might be a misconfiguration on the org wide default settings. So you need to fix it there by making it either read only or private. Okay, so these are pretty much most of the potential issues that you will normally face with sharing. And whenever one of this happens, you can follow a checklist. What all do I need to check? You don't have to panic. You don't have to worry about, oh shit, what went wrong? How did it go wrong? You can simply look at this set of things. You can look at the OWD first. You can look at the role hierarchy. You can check if you can check if the user is assigned to the public group or not. You can check the manual sharing. You can query the share record and see who are currently being given access and all of it. Okay, so when you drill down and when you do it step by step, you won't feel overwhelmed and you will not feel like, okay, something big has happened, something massive has gone wrong. No, nothing like that. Okay, and you'll be able to get on top of it and resolve it. All right, so that concludes the sharing settings video, which I thought I would do a single explain video, but then I realized that it is a very big, very huge topic. I hope I was able to convey good amount of information for you and you are able to understand at least 60-70% of the sharing. That would be really good for me. If the video, the part 1, part 2, part 3 are helpful, please comment and tell me that, okay, yes, this is something that has helped, and that would be great. All right, now coming to the quiz time to see what you learned. Let's take a look at the first question. If you have to look at a list view record based on the scope defined for you, what rule would you configure? Will you configure permission sets? Will you configure sharing sets? Will you configure restriction rules, or will you configure scoping rules? So the correct answer is scoping rules. D, scoping rules. Right? So because you want to look at a list view records and you want to define a scope, right? So you can filter by scope. You will use scoping rules. Question number 2. One profile can be assigned to multiple users, but one permission set cannot be. True or false? So the question is, multiple users can have the same profile assigned, but can a single permission set be assigned to multiple users? Yes or no? Can you assign permission set to multiple users? Yes, you can. So this statement is false. So this should be false. It is false. F. Okay. You can assign a profile to multiple users. You can assign a permission set to multiple users. If you have a custom object that's called bank underscore details underscore underscore C, what would be the name of the share object for the same? Would it be bank underscore details underscore underscore share? Would it be bank underscore details underscore underscore R? Would it be underscore underscore C underscore share? Or would it be simply share underscore bank underscore details underscore underscore C? It should be the first one, right? It should be the first one because instead of just the C, you just need to replace it with the share keyword. So A is the correct answer. Question number 4. How can you share records owned by you with your manager's manager? I think this is pretty straightforward. Everyone knows the answer. Is it manual sharing? No, it is Apex based sharing, right? No, even that's incorrect. Is it permission sets? No, this is role hierarchy. Let's check. It is B, role hierarchy. Whenever it's about a manager or manager's manager or some subordinate, always understand, okay, they are talking about role hierarchy. All right. Great. That is the end of the sharing settings explained video, a 3-part series that I created, and I hope I was able to deliver a good chunk of information on this set. Feel free to comment below any other tutorials that you want. I know I've already concluded that the Apex masterclass, the Apex curriculum, the server-side curriculum is coming up very soon on your doors. So be ready, get your notebook ready, and just start with the Apex curriculum. And I'm sure for people who are asking me or requesting me for creating the Apex series, you will definitely find a lot of value in the videos. And I think I can ensure after my admin playlist, I can ensure that this playlist, once you have visited and once you are done with it with me, you'll be able to write good code, right? So that's the expectation, that's the idea, and I'll leave it at that note. I'll thank you guys to be patient and understand and listen to this. If things were a bit faster, I'd recommend you take a look at that specific section one more time. And till then, I'll see you in the next video. Happy learning. Bye.